women and children gathered in a London cellar to grieve a dead 2-year-old boy. Within an hour, every one of them would be buried, not by earth, not by fire, but by a wall of beer. The child's name was John Saville. He had died the day before, on Sunday the 16th of October. In the Irish quarter of St Giles, a neighborhood known as Little Ireland, or, with bitter affection, the Holy Land, the custom was to wake the dead at home. So John's mother, Anne, 60 years old and grieving, had laid her son out in a basement room on New Street. The mourners came in 2s and 3s through the rookery's narrow lanes. Neighbors, kin, women holding the hands of small children. They lit candles. They prayed. They sat with the body. 300 yards away on Tottenham Court Road, the Horse Shoe Brewery loomed over the slum like a cathedral of porter. Meux Company had built it tall and proud. Inside stood wooden vats the size of houses, 22 feet high, banded with iron hoops, weighing 700 pounds apiece. London brewers competed for prestige by building these monsters. Meux's father had once erected a vat that held 20,000 barrels. The one that mattered on this Monday was smaller. It was merely vast. At about 4:30, a storehouse clerk named George Crick noticed that one of the great iron hoops had slipped off a fermenting vat of porter. He climbed down and reported it to his superior. His superior told him not to worry. These hoops failed 3 or 4 times a year, he said, and no harm had ever come of it. Write a note, he was told. We'll see to repairs later. Crick wrote the note. An hour later, the vat exploded. The force was apocalyptic. The bursting timbers knocked the stopcock clean off a neighboring vat. Hogsheads shattered. The brewery's rear wall, 25 feet high, 2.5 bricks thick, was blown outward into the street. Bricks were hurled clear over the rooftops of houses on Great Russell Street. And then came the wave. Somewhere between 120,000 and 300,000 gallons of dark, foaming porter, 15 feet high, crashing into the alleys of St Giles. At the Tavistock Arms on the corner, a 14-year-old barmaid named Eleanor Cooper was scouring pots at an outdoor pump. She never saw the beer. The collapsing brick wall buried her where she stood. She was the first to die. In a tenement on New Street, a woman named Mary Banfield was taking tea on the first floor with her 4-year-old daughter Hannah. The Scots magazine reported that the mother was washed clean out of the window, and the little girl was swept through a wooden partition, and in the magazine's terrible phrase, dashed to pieces. Mary herself, gravely injured, would survive in hospital. Her daughter would not. The basement room, where Anne Saville sat beside her son's small coffin, lay directly in the path of the flood. Because it was Monday afternoon, the working men of St Giles were out at the docks, the markets, the building sites. The cellars and parlors of Little Ireland were full of women and children. They had no warning. They had no chance. The house above the wake collapsed under the weight of beer and brick, and the cellar became a tomb. When the foam settled, 8 people were dead. The coroner read their names aloud at the inquest in St Giles Parish Workhouse 2 days later. Eleanor Cooper, 14, Mary Mulvey, 30, Thomas Murray, 3, Hannah Banfield, 4 years and 4 months, Sarah Bates, 3 years and 5 months, Anne Saville, 60, Elizabeth Smith, 27, Catherine Butler, 65, all women, all children, 5 of them mourners at Little John's wake. The legend grew quickly that crowds had rushed into the streets to drink the free beer, that one man later died of alcohol poisoning. The beer historian Martin Cornell has pointed out that none of this appears in the contemporary papers. And given how hostile the London press was to Irish immigrants, any drunken disorder would certainly have been reported. Instead, journalists described mourners, working in silence, listening at the rubble for the voices of the trapped. The Morning Post called it one of the most melancholy accidents in memory, a desolation equal to fire or earthquake. The 5 wake victims were given a second wake at the Ship Public House on Bainbridge Street. The other 3 were laid out in a nearby yard, where Londoners filed past and dropped pennies and shillings into a hat to pay for the funerals. Some accounts say relatives began charging admission to view the bodies, and that in one house the floor gave way under the weight of paying spectators, dumping them waist-deep into a flooded cellar. The jury returned its verdict. The deaths were casual, accidental, and by misfortune. An act of God. No one was liable. Meux Company petitioned Parliament and recovered more than £7,000 in excise duty on the spilled beer, narrowly avoiding bankruptcy. The victims' families received nothing from the brewery. A public subscription raised close to £1,000 for them, and several of the dead were buried at St Giles in the Fields. Henry Meux was granted a baronetcy in 1831 and died a wealthy man at his country estate. The Horse Shoe Brewery was demolished in 1922. The Dominion Theatre stands on the site today.